Good morning, everyone. We welcome you to the Board of Trustees meeting for the Utah Transit Authority. Today's Wednesday, May the 6th of 2020. Due to the COVID-19 restrictions, we are continuing our pattern of doing our meetings currently just live through a streaming mechanism. Public comments were received previously to this meeting and certainly are welcomed following this meeting. The participants today will also be participating through our WebEx portal, and you'll see them each as we go through the course of our meeting agenda. Due to this method, we've forgone the Pledge of Allegiance, but certainly pay our respect to our country and to those who are serving so diligently, including our own workers. We'll begin with our Safety First meeting, and we have Sheldon Shaw here to give us that message. Good morning, Sheldon. Sheldon, I think your thing is mute.
There you go. Sorry about that. Good morning, Chair, Trustees. As always, appreciate the opportunity to give a safety message, and UTA always puts safety front and center. Today, as you can see, I have the safety poster for May, which asks us to be proactive and report hazards. And who's responsible for reporting hazards? It's all of us. And so we're responsible for our own safety, for our coworker safety. We're all responsible for the public safety. And at the heart of that is finding, fixing, and following up on hazards. And so if you see something and you can take care of it, please do. If it's a trip hazard, you don't want someone behind you to trip. If it's something more entailed, you need to fill out a hazard sheet and make sure that gets submitted to the chain of command, and we'll find the right resolution for that. We'll engineer it out, we'll eliminate it, we'll find some kind of mitigation and make sure those hazards are addressed. And so again, it's everyone's responsibilities. Let's take care of the hazards we see out there. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Sheldon. Great, wonderful message. Our first item up is our consent agenda, which includes approval of minutes of our prior meeting. I'll turn to one of my colleagues to make that motion.
I move that we approve the minutes of the board meeting for April 29th of 2020.
Second.
I have a motion by Kent, seconded by Beth. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. Next up is our agency report, and that will be done by our Executive Director, Carolyn Gunott. And Carolyn, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. I just wanted to go over the ridership today. Actually, Eddie Cummins will be presenting that. And then Lauren Simpson will be doing a few minutes on a task force that we've set up internally as Utah moves forward, and the governor's recovery plan, Utah Leads Together 2.0, has been released, and agencies are beginning to use that. We are also looking at how we will be starting to recover our service as we had done some service modifications on April 5th. So Eddie's just going to go through the ridership where we are to date since that time frame, and then Lauren will follow up with that. So Eddie Cummins, our Chief Operating Officer.
Good morning. As Carolyn mentioned, I have Lauren Simpson with me today. We just wanted to provide a brief update on service and ridership, as well as our plan to move forward. As you may next slide, please. Sorry. As you may recall, we made some service modifications on April 5th as just kind of a reminder here. On fixed route bus, we maintained our span of service on most of the routes. We adjusted frequency on most 15 and 30-minute routes. We adjusted UVX service from 6 to 15-minute service. There were a few adjustments after this, just to kind of talk about this component. There were a few adjustments we had to make. After change day, we experienced heavy loads on a few of our routes. And to mitigate this issue, we added a few additional trips on routes 33, 35, 200, and 217 to enable social distancing. And then that last bullet on that area is in April, we also suspended some commuter bus routes where we had alternative service available. On light rail, we adjusted frequency from 15 to 30-minute service, and on commuter rail, we adjusted frequency from 30 minutes to 60-minute service Monday through Saturday. Next slide, please. So now I'd just like to turn your attention to ridership, kind of just to explain what we've seen over this period of time. Next slide. This chart shows 3 key points in time. You can see March 11th, which is when we began to take action in response to COVID-19. You can see March 18th, where we had the Magna earthquake, and then you can see change day on April 5th. As you can see, ridership's been relatively flat since April change day. If you look back in time, you can see we had this really sharp decline right after March 11th. Obviously, the earthquake was bad. And then as we got out to April change day, we started to see things stabilize. We've seen a few ticks up, and then it's kind of back down, but basically it stayed relatively flat. Fixed route bus is down currently about 70%. Light rail is down 75%. UVX ridership is down 83%. Our front runner ridership is down 86%, and paratransit's down 87%. Although we have seen a significant decrease in ridership, I think it's important to note that we are still carrying nearly 42,000 riders a day. You can see the actual average weekday ridership is 41,715. On fixed route bus, we're carrying about a little over 24,000. Light rail is 14,554. UVX, and I just want to make this point that the UVX bus ridership is included in that fixed route bus line, but I knew that there would probably be questions about how UVX is performing, so I wanted to break that out. The UVX is about 2,110 riders a day. Front runners at 2,615, and paratransit's at 220 riders.
Let me just add in real quickly. We're running, and Eddie, you can clarify this, or Lauren, we're running between 55 and 60% of the service that we normally would run during the weekday. So that's roughly what we're running today. Say 60% of our service we're running during the weekday.
That is correct. We're running about 60% of our service. Next slide, please. This next slide is Saturday ridership. You can see kind of some of the same points in time. And as you can see, ridership has been relatively flat. You can see the percentages over on the side. Saturday ridership's about 28, almost 29,000. And you can see the numbers kind of underneath that, what the breakdown is. Next slide, please. This is Sunday ridership. What's interesting here, same points in time, but if you look at fixed route bus and paratransit, it appears that we're starting to see a slight uptick on those particular items. Sunday ridership's about 13,672. And you can see the fixed route bus is 5380, and then light rail is 8278. And then, of course, we don't have any service on UVX or front runner on Sundays, and our paratransit ridership is about 15. As you know, as we look at these ridership numbers, well, first off, let me stop right there. Are there any questions on ridership before we move forward?
Yeah, Eddie, I did have one. It's actually more of a thought than a question, but this really does give you a pretty reflective snapshot of sort of the core group that absolutely depends on our service. I mean, you don't get this opportunity much, and to be able to analyze that, you know, I mean, I wished we weren't in this circumstance, mind you, but it is really telling of how many people are absolutely dependent on Sunday and Saturday and, you know, weekdays, and really have no other option in front of them. So they're actually fascinating numbers, although I'm grateful that they're stable.
Yes, that is accurate. There's still a lot of people depending on our service every day. You know, I think some of those are transit-dependent riders in general, and then a lot of it are frontline workers who are still using our system to get to and from work every day. So moving forward, as you know, we've implemented numerous measures regarding vehicle and facility cleaning, as well as issuing PPE to our employees. Our newest measure is the installation of a sneeze shield on our high ridership bus routes. And you can see the picture up here. These temporary shields provide a barrier between the operator and the passenger compartments. The shield is hinged. As you can see, the difference between the picture on the left and the right. These shields are able to open to allow people to enter or exit through the front doors for those who are still need the use of the ramp. Our maintenance staff at Building 8 designed and built 88 of these sneeze shields. 83 have already been installed, and we expect to have the other 5 installed today. So we've received a lot of good feedback. Obviously, this is a temporary measure, but we have received a lot of good feedback from our operators. When they originally installed, we did identify one challenge. Our first round, we installed 15 of them. And there was an issue with them staying open when somebody needed to pass through there. And so we ended up modifying the original design just a little bit, adding a Velcro strap to allow it to be able to keep those doors open. Next slide. So since, as you're well aware, since this pandemic began, we've been in reactionary mode, but we really feel like now it's time to start thinking about moving forward. As Carolyn mentioned, Governor Herbert recently announced the state's plan to move from high-risk phase to moderate risk phase on Friday, May 1st, under the Utah Moves Together 2.0 plan. So as the state transitions from red to orange, we're not necessarily planning to automatically add service. We want to be very strategic. Under Carolyn's leadership, we have created a recovery team that is working on a strategic plan to move the agency forward. Carolyn, before I turn it over to Lauren, would you like to say a few words about the recovery team?
Sure. So there's about 6 members of a task force, I would call them. And they of course, are not shouldering the load of doing everything. They're actually just strategizing. They're people throughout the agency, but they're representing sort of a broader strategic view. Lauren Simpson is leading that up. The regional general manager for the Salt Lake business unit. He's sort of moderating and facilitating. He's doing a great job. You'll hear from him in a moment. And then we have Nicole Bordeaux from our executive team participating as well as others. And I'll talk about that a little bit later on in another few meetings we'll go over once we have some more information to share. But this has been a great effort so far. They have sort of jumped on this within the last week and a half, have moved forward fairly quickly. We don't know how fast the state will open, and so we have to be nimble. We have to be flexible. As much as this pandemic, as Chair Christensen said, is not great, we can see the people who really need us and who are riding the system currently. We're trying to figure out, how does ridership come back? What is it that people want to see when they come back to ride the system? There's going to be surveys. So Lauren will go through that, but it's just, as much as to an extent, this has been somewhat of a tragedy, this pandemic, it gives us an opportunity to look forward. And the idea that we did service choices work and all the information we have from that will really set us, really, put us in a good seat in terms of being able to move forward. So Lauren, I'm going to turn this over to you, and we will be bringing back more information to you soon.
Good morning. As has been mentioned, UTA has organized a task force under Carolyn's direction. The purpose of the team is to develop a service recovery plan for current and post-COVID-19 conditions. And Carolyn has challenged us to develop a plan with 3 key desired outcomes. The first is to regain the ridership that has temporarily been lost. And in the long run, potentially achieving a higher ridership than the pre-virus. The second outcome that she's challenged us to work towards is achieving financial sustainability and stability in the short and long term. And the third is to rebuild community confidence. By confidence, we mean that as our customers return to their jobs and school, that they find transit as a viable and reliable and safe option. So the plan that we as a team are developing will be aligned, as has been mentioned, with the state's phased recovery plan. So as has been mentioned, the state has developed a recovery plan that is based not necessarily on a calendar, but more so on community conditions or risk levels. And the state's plan includes 4 phases, often referred to as a color. So the first phase that we were in was red, and that's a high risk level. We're currently in the orange phase, which is moderate. The next phase will be yellow, which is low risk. And then finally the green phase, which is a normal risk level. In the current orange phase, we're monitoring changes in ridership and preparing for the yellow and green phases when schools will begin to reopen and businesses return to more typical levels of service. During this phase and during the coming weeks, we will be surveying customers to find out if their expectations and travel patterns have or will be changing due to the COVID-19 experience. And we will use that to create a plan for the yellow and green phases and adjust our service going forward. We will create a plan that ensures that the service that we add and the timing of adding that meets the demands and the long-term service plan. As was mentioned, the service choices will be potentially refining that if we learn things from the customers through these surveys that their expectations have changed. We can tweak that plan, and so the service we add will need to be aligned with that, as well as, of course, our financial capacity and capability. And finally, we are reviewing our current enhanced cleaning practices, and we'll be making a recommendation going forward as to what we do in the future. Currently, we're continuing all of the enhanced cleaning practices that we implemented in the red phase and creating a plan now for the yellow and green phase in terms of what cleaning practices, boarding practices, and so forth that we'll be recommending in the future in the yellow and green phases. Any questions?
Lauren, I just have one, and I was just kind of reflecting. I was traveling on September 11th of 2001. I was supposed to return home from a conference that day. It probably took 3 days. I was in Florida till I could find a plane that was coming back, and I just remember how nervous, understandably, all the airline employees were, and not quite sure what to do, as we were trying to get on a plane. And even when I was connecting through Cincinnati at the time, Delta, they were still trying to gather crews to get the plane to come back to Salt Lake. And while I was grateful to get home, sort of going through that experience sort of made me timid about getting on the plane for a while. And never been timid, and I'm not scared to fly and those kind of things. I just wondered, sort of from an employee standpoint, as we go through this, is there some thought to training, and how do you instill confidence as the operators and others work trains to sort of give people this reassuring feeling as they get back on transit for the first time, even though in theory everything's good? I just wondered if you or your folks had any thoughts along that line.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point in terms of the customer's confidence as well as our employees' confidence. So as the employees have seen our response so far with implementing social distancing the best we can, the sneeze shield that Eddie mentioned, rear door boarding, we provided them with proper protective equipment of masks and gloves and cleaning supplies. They've seen the enhanced cleaning procedures, and I think that's given them some relative confidence going forward. Everyone's a little nervous, but it's remarkable how our employees continue to show up and continue to serve the public that depends on us. So I think their confidence is relatively high, and part of our plan will be looking at what we do in the next phases to make sure we retain that confidence and increase it. And as far as the community goes and the customers, this survey will really help us get feedback from them about how they're feeling, what their expectations, what their concerns are, and then we create a plan going forward to make sure that we meet those expectations so they are confident and comfortable in riding our service.
So the survey, there's a few surveys that are going to go on. One will be a survey actually of our employees, and we will be talking to them. Also, I think they have a lot of observations as well about the public that's traveling right now. And also how confident, how do they feel in the workplace? And I think that will be valuable feedback to us. So I do appreciate that question. The customer surveys that start this week, I think, or next week. They'll start very soon. Those surveys will begin of the customers that we have out on the line today. And then the other survey we'll be having is of the pass holders. That's a huge market of people who have the ability to take transit, and their employers are offering that, and be sending out, working with the different agencies and organizations and private sector companies that actually do have passes, and asking for their feedback, and schools about what their experiences and how exactly sort of what Lauren said is their decisions, how they might have changed since COVID-19 and what they're looking forward to. And then I think in general, we're looking at, and Lauren didn't mention this, we are looking at some, whether there's capital improvements we have to make to our system. And that includes some changing out the seats from a fabric to either plastic or vinyl, so that's easier to maintain, cleaner. Are there products out in the market? There's some national work being done by APTA, the American Public Transit Association, that's looking at all different measures. They have 3 committees set up. I do think our state is moving a little faster than most other areas, so that we might be ahead of that work, but we can still use any information that they would be producing, particularly in terms of products. They're working through that, and we're sharing all that information across all the transit agencies in the country right now as to what potentially will be out there that we could potentially implement, and we're looking at that as well.
Lauren, I wanted to ask you a question about, and thank you, Carolyn. I think that that's really helpful. I think that it is really important for everyone, our operators as well as the riders, to understand what we're doing and feel confident that they can return. I just wanted to ask if there was any anecdotal feedback from any riders in regards to the screens or the plastic shields that were placed in the buses. If there's been anything, if that's been a positive, what if anything you have heard thus far, or if it's just too soon to tell?
They see that not only as a social distancing measure for the operator, but for them, right? Because it creates some distance between them and the operator. We'll learn a lot more as we complete these surveys to see more in depth what people are thinking and feeling and expecting, and then adjust to that.
And is this going to be a pretty in-depth survey from all modes, or what are your thoughts on this structurally and like all parts of the service area?
Yes, it will be. It'll be in depth and focus on heavily on our pass holders and those who continue to ride, as well as those who are no longer riding, and why aren't they riding, and what are their plans for the future.
And also with those pass holders is to also those who have the passes and don't ride at all, even before, what is it, why haven't they, and to be able to interview them from that point of view as well.
Hey, Lauren, I don't know if this is to you or to Eddie, but can I just tell you what pride I have when I saw that self-designed shield that our shop folks created and then are working through that design. You think about how long others sort of struggled to get solutions, and as they work through it and refine it. Anyway, kudos to them for having that kind of creativity.
Yeah, we're very proud of our Building 8 maintenance folks. They really jumped in, took the bull by the horns, and really got them done quickly. It was quite remarkable, actually.
It's true. As a customer of theirs, as a business unit leader, we are so appreciative and amazed. They got on that immediately, created a plan, and worked through the weekend. And our operators really appreciated seeing this quick response to the evolving situation. And so likewise, as their customer, internal customer, we couldn't be more appreciative.
Okay, are there any additional questions on this item? I just also want to let you know is that tomorrow we'll be handing out masks, 8:30 to 10:30 at some of our key transit centers and stops. The customer relations team and general communications marketing has been out there. Actually, they have been in the works on trying to pull together this customer survey, so they've been a little ahead of the game. And so this being able to work on the recovery task force is also helping quite a bit. But anyways, just to let you know, we will be out at various locations tomorrow, and as we forward that to you, we're hoping that you're able to join as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Does that complete your report?
Yes.
Okay, excellent report. Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Lauren, for that input as well. That'll move us forward to item number 5, which is a financial report. And to that, we'll turn to our Chief Financial Officer, Bob Biles. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning, and we'll take a look at the March 2020 report. As we've talked before, this will start showing some of the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we'll just talk through some of that. If we could look at the dashboard. So sales tax for February was down. Part of that primarily is because the state pushed some of February's sales tax into January, which is why January was up 17%. So overall for the year, we're still at 4% positive. That's going to change. Our preliminary estimate for the distribution we'll get here in a few weeks, which is the March sales, that'll be down 15 to 20% is our estimate from the prior year. So we'll see how that goes. You can see in the fair revenue that we've already seen the impact in March. I don't have the April number yet, but I expect that to be much lower than the 3.7 million that's showing for the March actual. Operating expense, we're seeing favorable trends in operating expense, as you might expect. Some of that's due to the diesel price. In March, that was $1.59. I have the April number, that's $1.12 per gallon for diesel. And our year-to-date average after April will be $1.61 instead of the $1.77 that's showing there. And the passenger revenue, the fare revenue really follows the ridership to a certain degree. It's not exactly a one-to-one because some of the riders are still under contract, and so we won't see quite as large, at least I'm not expecting us to see quite as large a drop in fare revenue initially as the ridership is dropping. And then in the chart in the bottom, you can see the sales tax growth that decreased last month. Things were looking so positive here in Utah and in our region for sales tax, but that has changed dramatically. And we'll just see what that looks like going forward. Questions on the dashboard before we move to the next slide?
Any questions from the board? I'm not seeing any, Bob.
Okay, let's go to look at sales tax. And this is down from the last report we gave for the 12 months. Those have declined slightly due to the last sales tax we received. And that'll continue to go down. It'll be interesting to see how this changes by county and to see if there's any different impacts based upon the structure of the businesses within those counties. So if we go to the next slide, this is a new slide. It's really a concept slide right now. I think I want to track our revenue loss as well as our CARES Act drawdowns so we can just see what's happening to our cash flows. So for instance, in March, our passenger revenues were down about 1.2 million. And our sales tax collections, the ones we received in April, were down about 3.9 million. So combined, we're down about $5 million thus far. I'll probably change what this looks like, but I thought it'd be useful in the future to provide this. And then we can look at the expenses that are eligible for our CARES Act drawdowns. It's somewhere in the $6 to $7 million a month. And I'll update this in the next presentation to give you a more thorough explanation as we go forward. And I guess what I wanted to do there is ask, is there other information that would be helpful as we do this monthly financial report to show you what's happening overall with our revenues and with our ability to draw down the CARES Act funding?
One question I did have, Bob, is that I don't remember 2 or 3 meetings ago, we gave some approval for you to take the use our reserves just in case, especially if there were some cash flow issues. Have you had to use those reserves at all at this point? And
No, I don't anticipate we have. We're increasing the working capital from that 37 million up to around 56, 57 million dollars. So I don't anticipate anytime soon. We've got our grants group working fairly quickly to make sure we get the CARES Act grant approval as quickly as possible. And so I'm hopeful that our ability to draw down will offset our revenue losses, and it'll be fairly close.
I mean, this is probably just my old accountant, cost accountant in me coming out. I wondered if there was a way when you show the CARES funding, is there a way to show by like a subcategory what you're drawing down and for what?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we actually have a spreadsheet where we've done an estimate of how much would be susceptible to the CARES drawdowns. And so we have the actual for February. I think it's actual for February and March. We should have the April soon. But then we also have projections for the rest of the year.
Yeah. I would just be curious to sort of follow that, but you don't necessarily have to make it part of the report, but I'd certainly welcome it. Questions though, Beth, looks like you may have one.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Bob, I had a question about, and I don't know if this structurally has the level of impact that based on an overall, but do our education passes, are they on a cyclical time of year where they're like, where that constantly will be in play? For instance, do they always, I know that school always starts roughly in August, right? And I know that this is a big group of passengers. Is there any time in our year where any potential changes to our passes would be impactful? And how does that look? Or do they just get negotiated independent and there's not really any difference on that? Maybe you could just articulate that.
Sure. So I anticipate, depending upon what schools do, for instance, universities, that if they decide to move toward online in the fall, or if there's not college football, or if some things aren't going back to normal by the fall, that we'll be talking with those groups over the summer about what adjustments need to be made to the contracts. I think that's only fair.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks. I appreciate that. I think that is one of the elements that at this stage, obviously, we're not sure where that change is. I mean, I'm a U of U football fan, and I have my seats, but yet, yeah, no one knows how that's all going to look. So thank you.
Yeah, and as we go forward, we have some modeling of what we think may happen, but as decisions are made across the various entities in the region, we'll have to adjust that forecast. And as we see the actual revenues coming in, as we track our actual expenses, diesel fuel, lower diesel fuel obviously helps. I think you mentioned earlier about traveling. We're not traveling as much. So there's other offsetting savings that'll be helpful.
Any other questions from the board on either this slide or what we've had before? Go ahead, Bob.
Okay, let's go take a look at the expenses, and we look at them 3 different ways. This is by mode. The only one that's negative is maintenance of way, and that's $145,000 parts. We expect that to correct, but generally everyone's positive here. In the admin, which is the largest, it's really comprised of 3 things. The IT director, $1.2 million. Again, that probably has to do with some contracts. The executive director, $800,000. And the communications and marketing at $614,000 positive. And those are probably just some timing issues. If you want to look at it by chief officer, that's the next slide. Everyone is positive. The biggest ones are in operating, and all of the operating units are positive. Some of that's due to the diesel fuel savings, and then just changes have been taking place. And then the other one's the executive director. Again, that includes the IT director as well as the executive director. So those savings are showing up there too. And then the last way we look at it is by type. So wages and benefits are positive. You may remember in January that was negative, but that's turned around some, and very happy with that. We've got the services, that's the largest positive variance. Again, the IT director shows up in there at $968,000, and innovative mobility services at $557,000. Fuel is primarily diesel, $980,000. And then all other includes that contingency I talked about earlier. That's $576,000. And our travel expense is favorable, $175,000. Then there's some other items that make up that variance. So as we move forward into April, we're going to see some significant changes on the revenue side, and we'll probably spend more time talking about that. And I expect the expense side to continue to be favorable, to see that grow.
Great, thank you, Bob. Any remaining questions from the board? Okay, thank you, Bob, for that report. And
you're welcome.
Thanks for your team as they're quickly having to adapt and figure out the new normal along with everybody else. So that then brings us to item number 6 on our agenda, which is resolutions. And the first item up is a resolution authorizing the request of emergency funding reimbursement for coronavirus aid relief through the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, the Public Assistance Program. Mary DeLoretto is here to talk about that. Good morning, Mary.
Good morning, Chair, trustees. This resolution authorizes the executive director to execute grants from the Federal Emergency Management Act, or FEMA, their public assistance program. As you know, the governor declared a state of emergency on March 6th due to the outbreak of the coronavirus. So because of that, we are eligible for FEMA funding for any associated emergency responses for those activities. Eligible items include activities directed by a health official and activities directly related to the emergency, such as labor, materials, supplies, equipments, and contract work. And things we've purchased so far have been masks, disinfectants, wipes, foggers, that type of thing. There's a 25% local match required for this funding, which right now is coming from UTA's ongoing operating budget. If we have any larger items, we may have to add them to the capital budget going forward. Any questions?
I know we were expecting this resolution. Any questions, though, from the board? I don't see any, Mary.
Okay.
Well, with that, then, unless there's other discussion, I would entertain a motion on this resolution.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve R 2020-0501, the resolution authorizing the request of emergency funding reimbursement for coronavirus aid relief through the Federal Emergency Management Agency Public Assistance Program.
Second.
I have a motion from Beth, seconded by Ken. I'll ask for a roll call.
Trustee Millington,
Aye.
Trustee Holbrook,
Aye.
Chair Christensen.
Aye.
The vote is unanimous. Thank you.
Great. Thank you,
I
Mary.
just want to make a real quick comment on, we are still working with FEMA to try to figure out what exactly is reimbursable through these fund sources, and we'll continue to work on that. There is, right now, because there's so many questions coming to FEMA, we might get different answers on different things from different people. So we'll continue to work on that. And Bob could also talk about that as he goes through his reports in each month, is what we have been reimbursed through FEMA.
That would be great. Thank you for that insight, Carolyn. With that, we'll move then to contracts, disbursements, and grants. And our first one is a change order for our actuarial services with Millman. And We'll actually turn to our beloved Kent Millington, who's our representative on the pension committee. Morning, Kent.
Good morning, and thank you for this consideration. The Milliman contract for actuarial services on our pension fund and all that's required for the reporting was signed back in 2014. It was a 5-year contract with 2 one-year extensions. So the first 5 years expired at the end of October of last year. And this particular change order is to accept the first year of a 2-year extension for the Milliman actuarial services. The base contract through the first 5 years was $192,300. And this extension for this year that carries us through October of 2020 is for $46,400. So that brings the total contract up to $238,700, requiring, of course, board approval. Now, we're exercising only the first year of the 2 extra years. We are currently preparing an RFP to go out to request a renewal of these actuarial services. And we will be going out in the summer and early fall to request input from companies to bid on this contract. We've already told Milliman that we're not going to extend it to the last year of the contract, and they understand that. So we're actually extending this contract through October of this year for $46,400. We're asking for approval on this contract extension for this 1 year. And then by the fall, we will be back to the board for consideration of a new contract.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kent.
Any questions about the process or the amounts?
I did have a question, Ken. So when we complete the RFP and get it out there, we still anticipate some new entity to take over effective 11/1 of 2020. Is that right?
Well, it may be Milliman again, but
Right.
it
Whomever,
will be a new contract. Whoever it is, it will be a new contract that will start in November 1 of this year. Yes.
Thank you. With that, Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve the change order for the actuarial services with Milliman.
Second?
I have a motion from Beth, seconded by Kent. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you, Kent. Thanks for your efforts, and to Kim and her staff as
Kim
well.
and Jacob are the real prime movers behind this to get this taken care of and pursuing the new RFP.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Next item up is a change order for employer health insurance agreement. And we have Kim Milliberry. This is with PHP, or Public Employers Health Plan. And Kim, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. For simplicity's sake, I have 4 items that are all change orders related to the same topic. So I was just going to make a couple of...
Let me just mention that they include C, D, and E, and for the bargaining and administrative employees in both plans of PHP and then Select Health.
Yes, and so really I just wanted to point out that we do have 4 separate contracts with 2 vendors for our health insurance programs, because we have separate plans for our administrative employees and our bargaining unit employees. I also just wanted to point out that the contracts for the bargaining unit employees with these 2 vendors are technically with our joint insurance trust fund, which is managed jointly between ATU and UTA. All 4 of these items are change orders that are on existing contracts that have been in place since 2017 when we went out for a competitive bid process. We're happy with the services that are provided by both vendors. And all of these costs are included either in our 2020 budget or currently in the funding that we provide to the Joint Insurance Trust. So the first change order is, as you mentioned, for our administrative employee plan for PEHP, which is Public Employers Health Plan. The amended amount for this contract is for $3 million. That base existing contract value was for $7.9 million. So with this change order, it takes the new contract value to about $10.9 million. And I do want to point out that this particular contract change order represents a very low increase in our rates. All of them do, actually. So I just want to point out that we've done really well in our utilization and received great renewal rates from all of these vendors. So do you have any questions on that particular change order?
Do we want to approve them one at a time or all together?
Sorry, I realized my mic was off, but I did have one question for you, Kim. And it's not have to do with these contracts. It just has more to, as you look forward. And just thinking kind of through my own experience after a year and a half, have we ever given any serious thought to having a high deductible health plan option with one of these, or does the administrative costs of that just increase dramatically? Or
it was probably 6 or 7 years ago. We did look at that. I mean, we've looked at it a couple of times. It's not. We are looking at exploring it ongoing as we move forward. We haven't found that right plan that we think would work best. It is something we have to bargain with the ATU for the bargaining unit.
Sure.
As part of our joint insurance trust, and it's just not been something that has come to fruition. But we do look at it, and I know that Jacob has been in contact with our GBS, our benefits consultant, to talk about how that might be incorporated in our strategy moving forward.
And how long do these, I know these are just change orders, how long does these contracts go through?
We would have one more option year on each of these contracts.
Okay. Yeah. Did you have anything else though, Kim, on any of these, or?
Did you want me to do them? I think Trustee Millington was asking whether I should just go through the details of each of them all at the same time. Would that be the easiest?
Yeah, I would.
You need me to go through all? I mean,
I mean, if the terms are, if the circumstances behind them are different on any of these, you can certainly clarify that. But if it's just generally the extension and.
It's generally the change order. There are some, the dollar amounts are in the documents, and nothing unique outside of what I went through already with PEHP, with the one I just went through.
I know, Beth, you had a question.
I did. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kim, which one of these companies are utilized by the majority of our employees? Is it definitely favorable one versus the other, or does it really just truly like here's some options, we presented 2 options and people choose accordingly, and it's pretty 50-50?
We do see more tend to be on Select Health. However, I don't have that exact split, but we have quite a few. I mean, it's not like 70-30. It's more in the 60 to 40.
60-40. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's pretty split well in terms of what we're offering to the employees. Thanks.
Just many of our employees like those different networks, not just the Intermountain network. And that's why we try to offer PEHP to offer 2 choices.
Yeah. Thank you.
Other questions though on these contracts? And then let me come back to Kim's question. I would certainly entertain a motion to approve each of these change orders, B, C, D, and E in one motion, unless somebody wants to make them individually.
Well, I'll make the motion that we approve each of the 4 change orders. With the 2 for the Public Employers Health Plan for the administrative and bargaining unit employees, and the change order for Select Health also for administrative and bargaining unit employees, and approve the 4 contract change orders together.
I'll second.
I have a motion from Kent, seconded by Beth, to approve each of these 4 change orders for 2 vendors, both for administrative and bargaining unit employees. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Appreciate
For your work on this.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Next item up is item F on our agenda, and that's a real estate contract for the disposition of real property for the Porter Rockwell Bridge and with the Utah Department of Transportation. And we have our Director of Real Estate, Paul Drake. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you, trustees. So we have in front of us a proposal from the Utah Department of Transportation. They've been working on their Porter Rockwell Boulevard project that requires the acquisition of some property rights and some fee property from UTA. The proposed property transaction would allow them to construct a bridge over UTA's front runner corridor and an access road for maintenance for that. This exhibit shows where the property is. The requested fee property that would go to UDOT is shown in red. Sorry.
We need an advance one slide.
Yeah, advance that slide. Thank you. Okay, so the fee property is in red there. The aerial license over UTA's track is shown in blue, and then this green area is a proposed easement that would go to East Jordan Irrigation Company and would ultimately be conveyed in fee to Salt Lake City. For the board's purposes and per our policy, we're going to focus on the red and the green dispositions. So if we could advance one slide. So although, like I said, some of the property would go to other entities, the funding is going to come from UDOT, so they're listed as the buyer. The subject property is located at approximately 15700 South Pony Express Road in Bluffdale. The fee disposition to UDOT, which again was in the red, is just over 15,000 square feet. The easement to East Jordan Canal and the conveyance to Salt Lake City is just over 82,000 square feet. And for a total value of $457,300. That's based on appraised value. That's about $86,000 for that red piece to UDOT and $370,000 for the green piece to Salt Lake City. Other items to note is that the UTA's Capital Development Department has reviewed it and they have verified that there's no current or future impacts to UTA's transit service, including a possible double tracking in that area. UTA will also have access rights on that maintenance road that will be built and maintained by others. And there are no federal funds in this property. So if we could advance one slide, please. So staff feels that this is a fair negotiated value and that it's supportive of a state priority. So we recommend that the board do 3 things: declare the property as surplus, approve the disposition of the property, and then authorize the executive director to execute the contract and the related documents. Do you have any questions?
I do have a question, Paul.
Please.
The question I have, you mentioned the double tracking. Are we making sure that the bridge that's being built there by UDOT will accommodate the double tracking when we actually do the expansion in that area?
It will, yes. According to our capital development department, there's adequate room for that. Yes.
I had a question.
Did that answer your question, Ken?
Yes, I just hope that when they start building that thing, that bridge, that somebody's actually checking that to be sure that double tracking is not impinged by a bridge that's not wide enough.
Absolutely. My understanding is that well, we'll coordinate with our capital development folks to make sure to watch that project as it goes in.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I'm sure UDOT would have a vested interest in that success as well, but I think it would be more like somebody missed something, and I hope during the design and construction, both those get monitored a little bit.
Absolutely.
Beth?
Paul, I had a question in terms of, I had two questions. The first one was, and I don't know how we interact with UDOT on this particular structure, but I'm just curious as to what the seismic build is in regards to any bridges that go over or of course under our tracks, and do we coordinate with them at all? Is there like a state, and you might not know the details on the UDOT side, but I'm just curious as to how do they build those bridges now? What's their seismic requirements?
That's a great question, Beth, and I don't know that I am the right one to answer that. All I can do is guess that UDOT is meeting the appropriate standards for that. I'm getting some messages from Gray Turner. He says that they follow the seismic standards that are nationally and state approved.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
He also said to Kent's question is that it will be tight with their design, but there is adequate room still. So thank you, Gray.
My other question was on the fee structure. If we have access to the road in perpetuity, it's only a one-time fee. Is that correct? We aren't charged an annual access or anything like that.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. With that, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to declare the property as surplus and approve the disposition of the property, and to authorize the executive director to execute the contract and the related documents.
I'll second that motion.
I'll just add, I'm glad that we're able to collaborate with them on this. In my prior job, we did right-of-way acquisition or right-of-way funding for Bluffdale City and this Port of Rockwell. This is really the southern belt route for Salt Lake County and in part northern Utah County. So it's a really needed connection through that area. So I'm glad we're able to accommodate them. We have a motion from Beth, seconded by Kent. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
I think with that brings us to item number 8, which is a service and fare approvals, and one that we're hoping gets exercised with the Ogden Twilight Concert Series tickets for transit with Ogden City. We have Monica Morton, our affairs director, with us. And good morning, Monica.
Good morning. My request today is for approval of 2 fare revenue contracts. The first one is a tickets for transit agreement with Ogden City. So this year they will be hosting 10 concerts, and event attendees will be able to use their tickets to get to and from the concert on those days. It'll be valid for bus, tracks, front runner, streetcar, and BRT. And we anticipate the revenue amount to be approximately $23,000. We have worked with Ogden City in the past in previous years. It's been a very successful program, especially considering that the Front Runner Station is within walking distance of this venue. And they also coordinate their concerts to end when the last Front Runner train leaves. So with your support, we will move forward with implementing this agreement, assuming that everyone is healthy and all is well. Do you have any questions that I can answer this morning?
No question, just a comment, Monica. I know that Ogden City has really appreciated and enjoyed the relationship and, of course, the access. I know it's going to be an interesting scenario this summer to see what this looks like, but I'm excited that we're moving forward, and I'm excited that Ogden is well on board as well. So thank you.
I'm
happy to hear.
Monica,
Yes.
when do they start and finish? You say they're proposed 10. When are they expected to start?
Yeah, so I don't have an exact date, and I believe that they've pushed it back. I'm thinking it was either June or July, but we do have a clause in the contract in case any of the concerts are canceled. We will make an adjustment to the revenue amount. So hopefully they get all 10 in, and I've heard it's been pushed back the dates a little bit, but we'll have to see what ends up happening.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Okay, with no other questions, I'll move on to the second one then. So this is also a
Monica, just a sec, but we need to take a vote on
that's
this
right.
particular contract.
You can tell I'm out of the loop on this. Okay.
I see there's no other questions. I'll entertain a motion, Beth.
Mr. Chair, I'd love to make one. I move that we approve the fair approval, the Ogden Twilight Concert Series tickets for transit agreement with Ogden City.
Second.
I have a motion from Beth, seconded by Kent. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion passes. Let's go to the next one, Monica. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, so the second agreement is the same, only it's with Salt Lake City. They will be doing 5 concerts this year at the Gallivan Center, and we also expect it to be successful. This will be our first time working with them, but we do have a track station right there that's close in proximity as well. So we anticipate that the revenue from this agreement will be approximately $7,100, and it will include access to the same services as the Ogden Twilight Concert Series. And I'll take any questions that you have and would like to seek your approval this morning.
Would the tickets for transit also include commuter rail? I mean, I
It does.
think that's true on both sides, right?
Correct.
Questions from the board? With none, Kent, do you want to make a motion?
I will make a motion that we approve the Salt Lake Twilight's Concert Series tickets transit agreement with Salt Lake City.
Second.
I have a motion from Kent, seconded by Beth. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Monica, thank you, and thanks for your work on tickets for transit. We'll hope that this was supposed to be the banner year, and then actually it's not getting there yet, but thanks for your work on it. So
you're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, take care. We're now to item 9 for discussion, and it's a discussion item only on Rocky Mountain Power Memorandum of Understanding, and then we'll follow later on a budget amendment. For the first time, we have Mary Del Retto and Al Johnson with us. Good morning, both Mary and Hal, or I just see Hal right now, so maybe it's just you, Hal.
Good morning. Mary, did you want to say anything first, or do you want me to just go into it?
Yeah, just real quick, Hal's been working with Rocky Mountain Power for quite some time to take advantage of some of the things they can offer with us, and this partnership has been mostly his idea with Rocky Mountain Power, and I think it's a great opportunity. So Hal wants to present a memorandum of understanding we're working on with them right now. So go ahead, Hal. Thank you.
So just let me make a little quick comment. I guess a few months ago, we did have a presentation by Hal, and I think Rocky Mountain Power was there as well, talking about this. So this sort of is being, has been a little more fleshed out, I would say, the partnership vision, and an MOU created, a memorandum of understanding created. So I really want to thank Hal's work on this, as well as Rocky Mountain Power. And it's been very, it's a good partnership and ability to sort of be a little more innovative and move forward for our system.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Jana, do you want to go to the next slide? Or can I advance them? So I guess the partnership, Mary and Carolyn did a great job of introducing it. So we've been working with Rocky Mountain Power for a long time and really have a lot of commonality with agency goals, as well as we've been adding more electric buses to the fleet. So we've got 5 buses that we won through our first NOLO grant, and then we've won a second NOLO grant for 2 more buses, and then we've gotten Volkswagen funding for up to 20 more electric buses. And then finally, we have our Ogden BRT that's going electric. So we've got a pretty big investments going into electric buses, and with those buses, it requires a lot of charging infrastructure. And as I think I mentioned to the board last time, as we look at the charging infrastructure, the buses have a pretty significant load that they draw, especially with the high-powered charging when we're plugging the buses in. And so we've been having a lot of conversations with Rocky Mountain Power how to best manage it. And so one of the outcomes of that is this partnership agreement. So if you go to the next slide. And so we looked at some partnership agreement that Rocky Mountain Power and Salt Lake City had done in 2017, and kind of looked at that as a nice model for an agreement that UTA and Rocky Mountain Power could put together. And so, Jan, if you want to do the next one. So this was kind of the vision we put together. And you know, as we're adding the electric buses and making improvements to the track system, you know, we're making some pretty significant investments. And then we also, you know, from Rocky Mountain Power's side, there's a lot of opportunities to work with us, you know, to locate infrastructure, to better manage the grid, potentially through the buses that we have. And so, you know, we really see a lot of commonalities between the two agencies. And so if you go to the next one, it's got a little bit more detail. So these are kind of the areas that we established of kind of collaboration. And so we've done a lot with Rocky Mountain Power on energy efficiency over the years. They have what they call their WattSmart program, and our facilities maintenance group has done a great job of taking advantage of that program with Rocky Mountain Power. And we've done a lot of facility improvements, a lot of lighting changes, and there's been some nice savings for UTA over the years with that program. And then, as I mentioned, with the electric buses coming online, as well as, you know, if we do more of the driverless shuttles, those are electric vehicles. So there's a lot more, you know, electric vehicles in the future. And then with our track system, we've got, you know, pretty significant amount of electrical infrastructure that needs to be replaced over time. And then, you know, as I mentioned earlier, there's some potential with grid resilience with the electric buses to be able to take advantage of the capacity of the batteries that they provide. And then kind of the last area of collaboration is in research and grants. And so we've got one project underway with Rocky Mountain Power looking at our depot district area here and how to best manage the load as we're working in building a new bus garage behind our building. So Jen, if you could do the next one. So this is the WattSmart program that I mentioned. And so we've actually just started work with Rocky Mountain Power and their WattSmart team, kind of re-looking at all the UTA facilities. They've got a great program, a great group that we're working with there. And so this has some potential nice savings for UTA to come through this program. If you want to do the next one. And then this is the electric vehicle. I mentioned, we've got the electric buses, and then we've got, the small shuttle that we've tested before. And then one of the things that's mentioned in our future frontrunner study is electrifying the frontrunner system as a long-term vision for it. So that has a pretty significant load, as well as a lot of opportunities to integrate with Rocky Mountain Power as we look at the future of the frontrunner system. You can do the next one. This is the project I mentioned that we've started with Rocky Mountain Power, looking at how to best manage the electric buses we have. When we put in the charging infrastructure over at the central station, we've got a 1 megawatt power service that we provide to that. And so with our 2 high-power chargers, it's like plugging in several hundred homes all at the same time when we plug those buses into the grid. And so we want to work with Rocky Mountain Power on how to best manage the spiking that happens with the track system on the grid, as well as the electric buses. And so we're working with Utah State to kind of help design some control systems to kind of help minimize the grid impact, which has a lot of long-term cost implications for UTA cost savings if we can work that out to make some small adjustments in how we charge vehicles. So next slide. And so, looking at grid resilience, that's one of the, when we had the earthquake, that was one of the problems we had, was the grid kicking off in a few places. And so that's some of what we've been working with Rocky Mountain Power to help improve grid reliability, and they've prioritized us as a high priority to return service when there's service interruptions. So next slide. And then this is the research and grants. So there's a lot of grant initiatives out there. Department of Energy just recently had a number of grant opportunities that came out, and Rocky Mountain Power, Utah State, ABB, a number of other partners we worked with have submitted grants that could potentially benefit UTA. And then there's another grant opportunity that has come out from Department of Energy that we're evaluating. So there's a lot of movement in this grant and research space, and having good projects and good partners like Rocky Mountain Power and Utah State helps, enables us to really compete for some of these grants that otherwise we wouldn't really look at. And we've also got our normal grant initiatives that we do for electric vehicles with NOLO. That program, it's low and no emission buses, and the Federal Transit Administration administers that program, and there's funding every year for purchase of electric vehicles. So I think next slide, that may be my last one. So the next steps with this is to have UTA and Rocky Mountain Power approve the MOU, and then we've got a implementation plan we've been working with Rocky Mountain Power on, and then just continue our partnership with the 2 agencies moving forward. So the MOU basically memorializes the points in the PowerPoint presentation. It's got a little bit more detail in it, but it's just a guiding document for UTA and Rocky Mountain Power to work together over the next coming years. So let me know if you have any questions. Happy to answer any questions.
Let me look to the board. Beth, you look like you might have a question, and then Jen.
Hal, thank you for this presentation. I really think that this is fantastic. I think it is really smart for us to figure out a strategy long term, so that when we do get to different sources of propulsion, that we are able to manage it more effectively. I did have a question in regards to, I wasn't sure, but I was wondering if you could articulate, does UTA only deal with Rocky Mountain Power? And I asked that question because there are several municipalities that our service goes through, like Murray, Lehigh, Provo, that all do their own municipal power. And I was curious as to whether we would do agreements with them or if we strictly have an exclusive agreement with Rocky Mountain. I just wasn't sure. So maybe you could articulate that.
That's a great question. We do get service from Murray Power for the traction power substations we have in Murray, as well as our station sites in Murray, and then similar with Provo Power. Those are the two big ones that I know about with respect to municipal power. So right now, this partnership's kind of focused on Rocky Mountain Power, but I've kind of thought about that we should, as we get this under our belt, then we can talk with the municipal providers as well, and continue to work with our municipal power provider partners.
Yeah, I think that that's a great strategy. I really think it's good to work with the municipalities as well, since there are actually, I'm not sure, I think roughly 36 municipalities in the state of Utah that do have their own power. And I don't know how many of those we run through besides the ones that I just mentioned, but it's always a good strategy, I think, for us to make sure we're looking at those things. So thank you.
Thanks, Beth. Ken, did you have a question?
Well, I don't have so much a question as a comment. I've had the privilege of working with Hal and the Rocky Mountain Power people as we've gone back to Washington last year in promoting this partnership. And it was very well received by FTA and the Department of Energy. So I'm really encouraged by the progress that's being made here. I think there's some real opportunities to control our costs going forward, given the move to electric vehicles. So I really applaud what's being done here, and think this is going to pay off for us in the long run.
Thank you. And I'll just echo all those comments, Helen. I'd also just say, Rocky Mountain Power has always been a good local partner, but when you look at their corporate structure and the depth of resources that they have up above them, the things that we learn in this partnership really have the ability to affect more nationwide. And when you mix in the technical expertise of Utah State and its folks, I think this is a really great opportunity to collaborate. So thank you for you and others who have worked to get to this point.
Thank you so much. And as I say, this is a great opportunity for UTA, and really appreciate the support of the board and the executive team on the work with Rocky Mountain Power.
Great. Well, thank you. And thanks, Carolyn, for your leadership with your staff, and we'll look forward to more good information to come. I think that's it on your presentation, correct, Hal? Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much.
Just making sure. Have a great day. Next up is a proposed 2020 budget amendment number 2, and we bring Bob Biles back. Welcome, Bob.
Welcome again, and let's go to the next slide. We'll talk about the budget amendment number 2. It's comprised of some operating budget adjustments and some capital adjustments also. So if you go to the next slide, please. This is the operating budget changes. There's really 3 of them. The first one is a $250,000 grant from UDOT to be used to develop a comprehensive plan to address the problem of limited transportation options for seniors, persons with disabilities, and other transportation disadvantaged groups. So this project's already underway, I understand, and is scheduled for completion this year. The second one is also similar in that it's an interlocal agreement between UTA, Salt Lake County, UDOT, and several cities and ski resorts to provide some additional maintenance and upkeep of park and rides. And so it's $22,000 that gets added to the facility's operating budget. Then the third one is we looked at budget change. We set contingency funds aside in the operating budget and in the capital budget. We think we've put too much into the operating contingency, and that's just simply moving that $638,000 to the capital contingency line item. So the net effect to the operating budget shown here in this chart below, operating revenues are up $250,000. That's the UDOT money. Paratransit service up $250,000. Operations support up $22,000. Transfer out of contingency to capital $638,000, and then the $22,000 difference is that operating support transfer from contingency to the operating support line. So the operating budget changes are fairly minor in this particular budget amendment, and I'll stop there and ask if you have any questions on those.
Questions from the board?
Okay.
I'll just process-wise, this will go to the advisory council as well, correct?
Correct. I'll get to that on the last slide. The
Okay,
next steps.
great.
But you're right, it does go to the local advisory council, and then it'll come back to the board after the local advisory council has many suggestions that they want to make. So if we go to the next slide, that starts in on the capital budget changes, and there's really 5 major reasons. Every year we have capital carry forward projects. We budget what we think we can get accomplished. Projects have different timelines, and sometimes they get carried forward. So in this case, we've got about $49 million of capital projects being carried forward. There's 100 projects in that group, and we've given you the detail of all the capital projects that make up this particular amendment just for the capital carry forward. We also look at timing of projects, and that's really the next line. It's the project reductions. It's not that we really reduced these projects. There are, if I remember right, 6 of them. Really, it's moving those expenses into 2021. So that involves some of our larger projects. Let's see, that includes the Depot District, Ogden-Weber State University BRT, and Airport Station relocation, and some of the Tiger programs. So it's just not going to happen in 2020. So we've already recognized that and moving those over to 2021. The next line's Front Runner and Light Rail State of Good Repair projects. And these are 7 projects I think we've talked to you about before, Eddie did, that were weather related to make sure that we get these improvements done before next winter arrives so that our rail system's reliability will be higher. There are a couple of new projects. Several of these are funded through grants. For instance, there's an FTA pass-through grant of $2.2 million. There's a Frontrunner business plan of $1.9 million. A lot of that came from the state, a planning grant from them. We're doing bus shields, about $700,000. Eddie talked about that a little bit, but these are the ones that go right next to the operators. And then Carolyn talked earlier about the light rail seat replacement. That's about $4.2 million. So there were 6 projects there. And then the reallocation, that's really just the money coming in from the operating fund. Total takes the capital budget from $196 million to a little bit over $223 million. And we provided descriptions of all the projects and spreadsheets that have quite detailed information about each individual project and the revenue source for those. So let's go to the next slide. It says revenue at the top. It's really expense. I noticed that this morning. Haste makes waste when you put these things together. And so this shows the Depot District, that $15.9 million, that gets moved to 2021. The same is true for Ogden-Weber BRT and for the airport. Provo-Orem Trip, that's really a carryover from the 2019 projects. And then the State of Good Repair and other capital projects, those are a combination of carry forward from last year as well as the new projects that we talked about. And so again, it shows going from $196 million It's a $27 million net increase into the capital budget, taking us to the $223 million. Go to the next slide. It says expense, it's really revenue. Again, haste makes waste. So this shows the adjustments. Current year funding, the $18 million adjustment is really the carryover from 2019, almost all of that. With those projects, the various funding mechanisms are spread throughout this proposed amendment number 2 column. The next line is transfer for operations. That's at $638,000 we talked about. The 2018-2019 bond proceeds, the almost $29 million there, is really related to the BRT and the Depot District and the airport, and just moving that to 2021. We've talked about several of the new grants that have shown up, but this also includes the grants that are being carried over from 2019. Same thing with local partner contributions. A lot of that is carryover from the prior year. State contribution includes $1.6 million for the planning grant, and then some carryover. And the leasing is carried over from 2019. We had some leases that we issued in 2019. The equipment did not arrive in 2019, so we're anticipating that'll show up in 2020. We're just bringing that lease financing forward. So it's not actually increasing how much we'll issue in leases this year. It's just recognizing the source of that revenue. The questions about the capital. I know I went through it very rapidly. Again, you've got lots and lots of detail on all of these projects.
Looking to the board, any questions? Maybe, Bob, we'll just ask our staff to maybe correct these slide titles before we finalize the minutes, just so if a question comes up later, maybe you can work with them on that.
Sure, that's what happens when you copy from slide to slide and miss changing something. And then the last slide is the schedule, and as you're right, it's the May 27th Local Advisory Council, and then it comes back to the board June 3rd for a resolution to approve the budget amendment.
Thank you, Bob. By the way, you're allowed one mistake, and I know you're retaring in August, so there you go.
Yeah, I'm starting to make more mistakes. It's really good stuff to do.
Thanks for your work on presenting all of that. That's a lot of line items that were changing, so thank you.
Yeah, it's a lot of work from a lot of people. Mary DiLoretto and her group spend a lot of time putting the capital together, and it's not easy tracking all the revenue from one year to another and making sure we get that right. So Mary and her staff did a great job, and I just put it together.
Thanks. I wanted to echo what everyone else said, Bob. Nice work, and kudos to all of the people who are working so hard on your neck of the woods. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you again, Bob. With that, again, was for information only. Our next item is just our next meeting. Now, this says May 20th, but I think that's probably June.
No,
maybe
it's May.
It is May 20th.
May 20th. And then
We haven't gone through May yet, Carlton. I know it seems like it.
Yeah, I just thought May had all expired. Shame on me. All right.
April seems like 1,000 days, so yeah.
May 20th at 9 a.m. So with that, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion we adjourn.
second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Thanks to staff for helping today's meeting get completed. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.